The stagecoach rattled to a stop outside Whitfield's general store, sending a plume of dust spiraling into the crisp Wyoming air as Nora Winters stumbled forward, her belongings unceremoniously tossed onto the wooden platform behind her. The year was 1878, and Desdemona, Wyoming was little more than a dusty outpost clinging to existence along the newly constructed railway line that stretched across the territory like an iron snake. "I said I don't want her anymore," Gerald Blackwell announced loudly, his voice carrying across the depot where a small crowd had gathered for the twice-weekly train. "The woman can't give me children. Useless as a wife." He adjusted his expensive waistcoat, a stark contrast to Nora's simple calico dress, now stained with travel dust. Nora's cheeks burned with humiliation as she stood on unfamiliar ground, hundreds of miles from her childhood home in Missouri. At 23, she had been married for 3 years to a man who had courted her with promises of a good life in Wyoming territory. Now he was discarding her like damaged goods. "Gerald, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You can't just leave me here." "Already did," he replied coldly, stepping back onto the stagecoach. "Got myself a new arrangement with the Thompson's daughter. She's young and fertile." Without another word, he tapped his cane against the roof of the coach, and the driver snapped the reins. Nora watched in disbelief as the coach rumbled away, leaving her alone with her small trunk and a carpetbag. Several onlookers averted their gaze, embarrassed to witness such a spectacle. A few women clucked their tongues in sympathy, but none approached. "Madam, you all right there?" The voice came from behind her, deep but gentle. Nora turned to see a tall man astride a chestnut stallion. His face was partially shadowed by a well-worn Stetson, but she could see he was studying her with concern in his eyes. Dust clung to his denim trousers and the leather vest he wore over a simple cotton shirt. A weathered holster hung at his hip. Nora began, but found she couldn't finish the sentence. What could she possibly say? That she was fine. That would be a lie too obvious even to strangers. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing himself to be taller than she'd first thought. He removed his hat, exposing sun-bronzed features and eyes the color of the Wyoming sky. His dark hair was in need of a trim, and a few days' worth of stubble lined his jaw. "Name's Nathan Adler. I run the Cross Timber Ranch about 10 miles west of town," he said, extending a calloused hand before thinking better of it and dropping it back to his side. Nora nodded politely. "Nora Winters. Or I suppose it's Blackwell still, though I'm not sure for how much longer." Her voice cracked on the last words. Nathan's gaze drifted to the retreating stagecoach, then back to Nora's face. "That man your husband?" "He was," she admitted, struggling to maintain her composure. "He's decided I'm not suitable as a wife anymore." The words felt like gravel in her throat. Nathan's expression darkened. Man leaves his wife stranded at a depot. He shook his head in disgust. "You got someplace to go, Mrs. Blackwell." Nora glanced around at the unfamiliar town. The nearest relative she had was an elderly aunt back in Missouri, and she certainly didn't have the funds to make such a journey. "I'm afraid not, Mr. Adler." The cowboy was silent for a moment, contemplating. Then, with a decisiveness that suggested he wasn't a man prone to second-guessing himself, he said, "Well, I can't leave you standing here. My sister Martha helps run my place. She could use the company of another woman, I reckon." He reached for her carpetbag. "Come home with me, Mrs. Blackwell. At least until you figure out your next steps." The offer was made simply, without ceremony, but with an unmistakable kindness. Nora hesitated, looking into the stranger's face for any sign of deception or ill intent. She found none, only a straightforward compassion that seemed as natural to him as breathing. "Why would you help me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan shrugged, a gesture both casual and profound. Out here, we help folks when they need it. That's just how it is. He whistled softly, and his horse trotted closer. Besides, no decent man would leave a woman alone in a strange town with night coming on. Nora glanced up at the sky. Indeed, the afternoon was waning, the blue deepening toward evening. She had nowhere to go, no money to speak of, and the reality of her situation was beginning to sink in with terrifying clarity. "Thank you," she finally said, the words inadequate for the relief that flooded through her. "I accept your offer, Mr. Adler, though I wouldn't want to impose for long." "Let's not worry about that now," Nathan replied, securing her carpetbag to his saddle. He turned to a young boy who had been watching the exchange with undisguised curiosity. "Jimmy, run over to the livery and tell Pete I need the wagon for Mrs. Blackwell's trunk. Tell him I'll settle up next time I'm in town." The boy nodded eagerly and dashed off. "We'll wait for the wagon before heading out," Nathan explained. "It's not a difficult ride, but I reckon you've had enough jostling for one day." Nora nodded gratefully, studying this unexpected savior. There was nothing particularly remarkable about Nathan Adler at first glance. He was simply a working rancher with the lean build and weathered features common to men who spent their days under the open sky. Yet there was a steadiness to him that called to something deep within her, something that had been eroding slowly during her years with Gerald. "You're very kind, Mr. Adler," she said quietly. Nathan shifted uncomfortably, clearly unaccustomed to praise. "Just doing what needs doing, madam. Nothing more." He turned his attention to adjusting his horse's bridle, but not before Nora caught the slight reddening of his tanned cheeks. For the first time since the stagecoach had pulled into Desdemona, Nora felt a flutter of something other than despair. It wasn't hope, not yet, but perhaps it was the first fragile step toward it. The wagon arrived, driven by a grizzled older man who tipped his hat to Nora before helping Nathan load her trunk. With her belongings secured, Nathan helped Nora onto the wooden bench beside him. "Ready?" he asked, gathering the reins. Nora looked back at the depot, where her old life had come to an abrupt and unceremonious end. Then she turned her gaze toward the open country stretching westward, wild and unknown. "Yes, Mr. Adler," she said. "I'm ready." As the wagon pulled away from Desdemona, Nora couldn't help but wonder what awaited her at the Cross Timber Ranch. She knew nothing of this man except that he had shown kindness when she needed it most. It wasn't much to build on, but it was more than she'd had an hour ago. The late afternoon sun bathed the landscape in golden light as they traveled, illuminating rolling grasslands dotted with sagebrush and distant stands of pine. Nathan drove in comfortable silence, seemingly content to let Nora absorb her surroundings without feeling obligated to fill the air with conversation. Eventually, though, he glanced her way. "You from back east originally," Nora nodded. "Missouri. I met Gerald when he came through on business. He painted quite a picture of life out west." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "I suppose I was naive enough to believe it all." Nathan's hands tightened slightly on the reins. "Wyoming territory isn't for everyone," he acknowledged. "But it's got its own kind of beauty, if you've got eyes to see it." As if to emphasize his point, a pair of antelope bounded across the trail ahead, their white rumps flashing in the sunlight before they disappeared into a draw. "I can see that," Nora agreed, watching the animals vanish. "It's different from Missouri, wilder, more open." "That it is." Nathan nodded approvingly. "My pa brought us out here when I was 12, said a man could breathe out west, took to it right away, though my ma had a harder time of it. And your sister, Martha, was it?" "Martha," he confirmed. "She was just 8 when we came, grew up knowing nothing else. She keeps house for me since our parents passed. Pa 5 years back, Ma the year after. I'm sorry for your loss, Nora said sincerely. Nathan acknowledged her sympathy with a slight nod. Life takes its tolls on everyone, I reckon. Just got to keep moving forward. The simple philosophy resonated with Nora's current circumstances. Keep moving forward. What choice did she have? As they crested a gentle rise, Nathan pointed ahead. There it is, cross timber. Nora followed his gesture and saw a collection of buildings nestled in a shallow valley. A substantial log house sat at the center, with a barn, stables, and several smaller outbuildings arranged around it. A creek wound its way behind the property, and beyond that, a pine forest climbed the foothills of mountains that dominated the western horizon. It's lovely, Nora said, genuinely impressed by the picturesque setting. Nathan's expression softened with pride. Started with just the small cabin there. He indicated a structure near the main house. Built the rest over the years. Got about 80 head of cattle now, some decent horses. Nothing grand, but it's mine. There was quiet dignity in the statement that Nora found deeply attractive after Gerald's constant posturing and pretensions. Nathan Adler might be a simple rancher, but he was honest about who he was. As they approached the ranch, a woman emerged from the main house, shading her eyes against the setting sun. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with the same dark hair as Nathan, though hers was pulled back in a practical braid. That's Martha, Nathan confirmed. Probably wondering who I'm bringing home. He flicked the reins, urging the horses to a slightly faster pace. Martha Adler's expression shifted from curiosity to surprise as they pulled into the yard and she got a clear look at Nora. Nathan. She called questioningly as he set the brake and jumped down. Martha, this is Mrs. Blackwell, Nathan said, helping Nora down from the wagon. She needs a place to stay for a bit. Mrs. Blackwell, my sister Martha. Nora extended her hand. Please call me Nora. Your brother has been very kind to offer me shelter. Martha took Nora's hand, her grip firm but not unwelcoming. Her eyes, the same striking blue as her brother's, assessed Nora with undisguised curiosity. It's nice to meet you, Nora, she said. Though I'm a bit confused as to how you came to be in my brother's wagon. Nathan cleared his throat. Mrs. Blackwell's husband left her at the depot in Desdemona. Just drove off and abandoned her there. Martha's expression immediately softened. Oh my word, how terrible. Of course you must stay with us. She shot a look at her brother that Nora couldn't quite interpret before taking Nora's arm. You must be exhausted. Come inside, and I'll show you where you can wash up before dinner. Nora allowed herself to be led toward the house, glancing back to see Nathan already unloading her trunk from the wagon. He caught her eye briefly and offered a reassuring nod before returning to his task. The interior of the Adler home was a pleasant surprise. Though constructed of rough-hewn logs, the main room was spacious and well-appointed, with a large stone fireplace at one end and sturdy, handcrafted furniture throughout. Colorful rugs softened the plank floors, and curtains of cheerful calico framed the windows. It spoke of care and permanence in a way that made Nora's heart ache for what she'd never had with Gerald. It's lovely, she said to Martha, who was watching her reaction. We try to make it comfortable, Martha replied. Nathan works so hard outside, I figure the least I can do is make the inside worth coming home to. She led Nora down a short hallway. You can use this room. It was our parents', but it's just been sitting empty these past few years. The bedroom was simply furnished with a double bed, a chest of drawers, and a small table with a basin and pitcher. A quilt in shades of blue and green covered the bed, and a small window looked out toward the mountains. I'll bring fresh water for washing, Martha said. And I've got a stew on for dinner that'll be ready shortly. You rest a bit if you like." Left alone, Nora sank onto the edge of the bed, the events of the day crashing over her with renewed force. Just this morning she had been a wife, albeit an unhappy one. Now she was. What? Not quite a widow, certainly not a desirable marriage prospect. A burden on the charity of strangers. Tears welled in her eyes, but she fought them back. Crying wouldn't change her situation. Nathan's words came back to her. Just got to keep moving forward. By the time Martha returned with the water, Nora had composed herself. She washed her face and hands and smoothed her travel-worn dress as best she could before following Martha back to the main room, where Nathan was stoking the fire. "Sit down, please," Martha urged, gesturing to the table that was already set for three. "I hope you like venison stew. Nathan brought down a nice buck last week." "That sounds wonderful," Nora assured her. "I'm grateful for anything after such a long journey." Nathan pulled out a chair for her, the courteous gesture performed with an unaffected naturalness that spoke of good upbringing rather than calculated charm. It was another stark contrast to Gerald, whose manners had always been theatrical performances designed to impress. Dinner was a simple but delicious affair, the hearty stew accompanied by fresh bread and preserves. Martha kept the conversation flowing, asking gentle questions about Nora's background while carefully avoiding any mention of her marriage. Nathan spoke little, but Nora was aware of his attentive gaze whenever she did talk. "Nathan tells me you're from Missouri originally," Martha said as she served apple pie for dessert. "What part?" "A small town called Oak Ridge near Springfield," Nora replied. "My father was the local doctor there until he passed away 5 years ago." "A doctor's daughter," Martha exclaimed. "No wonder you speak so well. Did you help your father with his practice?" Nora nodded. "When I was older, yes. I learned quite a bit about tending to injuries and common ailments." Nathan looked up from his pie with interest. "That's useful knowledge out here. Nearest doctor's in Laramie, almost 50 miles away." "I'm hardly qualified," Nora said quickly, "but I do know the basics of wound care and such." "Still more than most of us know," Nathan pointed out. "Had to stitch up my own arm once after a run-in with a fence, made a mess of it." He pushed up his sleeve to reveal a jagged scar on his forearm. Nora winced. "That must have been painful." "More painful watching him do it," Martha interjected with a smirk. "Stubborn as they come, my brother." Nathan shrugged, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Got the job done." The easy banter between the siblings warmed Nora. It had been a long time since she'd experienced such genuine family interaction. Gerald had no siblings, and his relationship with his parents had been formal and cold. After dinner, Nathan excused himself to check on the stock, leaving Martha and Nora to clear the table. "He's a good man, my brother," Martha said as they washed dishes. "Never thought twice about taking in a stranger in need." "I'm very grateful," Nora replied. "I don't know what I would have done otherwise." Martha was quiet for a moment, her hands busy with a plate. "May I ask what happened? With your husband, I mean. Nathan said he left you at the depot, but—" Nora's hand stilled in the wash basin. "We've been married 3 years, and I haven't conceived," she said simply. "Gerald decided I was barren and therefore useless to him. He's arranged to marry someone else, someone younger, who will presumably give him the children he wants." Martha's eyes widened. "Just like that? Can he even do that legally?" "I don't know," Nora admitted. "But Gerald has money and connections. I'm sure he'll find a way to make it happen." She resumed washing, trying to keep her voice steady. "The truth is, I'm not even sure I want to fight it." He was not a kind husband. The admission hung in the air between them. Martha touched Nora's arm gently. "I'm sorry," she said, and the simple words carried genuine compassion. "Thank you," Nora replied, "but perhaps it's for the best. A clean break, even if it was rather public." They finished the dishes in companionable silence. When Nathan returned, he found them sitting by the fire, Martha showing Nora a quilt she was working on. "Everything all right out there?" Martha asked. Nathan nodded, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. "All quiet. That new mare's settling in well. Nathan's been expanding his breeding stock," Martha explained to Nora. "He's got an eye for good horseflesh. Just trying to diversify a bit," Nathan said modestly, taking a seat across from them. "Cattle prices have been unpredictable lately." As the evening wore on, Nora found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years. There was something soothing about the Adlers' home and their unassuming ways. When she finally retired to the bedroom Martha had prepared for her, exhaustion claimed her quickly, and she slept more soundly than she had in months. The next morning, Nora woke to sunlight streaming through the small window and the distant sounds of activity outside. For a moment she was disoriented, expecting to see the fussy wallpaper of Gerald's house in Cheyenne. Then the events of the previous day came flooding back, and she sat up, taking a deep breath to steady herself. A knock at the door preceded Martha's cheerful voice. "Nora, are you awake? Breakfast is nearly ready." "Yes, thank you," Nora called back. "I'll be right out." She dressed quickly in one of the few dresses she had brought with her, a simple blue cotton that had been deemed too plain by Gerald for regular wear in Cheyenne society. Catching her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand, Nora noted the faint shadows under her eyes, but also a certain clarity in her gaze that had been missing for some time. In the kitchen, Martha was placing a platter of flapjacks on the table while Nathan poured coffee. "Good morning," Nora said, smoothing her skirt self-consciously. Both Adlers looked up, their greetings warm and natural. Nora slipped into the chair Nathan held out for her, noting again the easy courtesy that seemed second nature to him. "Sleep well?" he asked, resuming his own seat. "Better than expected," Nora admitted. "Your home is very peaceful." Nathan nodded, seeming pleased by the observation. "Different from town living, I expect." "Very different from Cheyenne," Nora agreed. "And from what little I saw of Desdemona yesterday." "Desdemona's hardly a town at all," Martha said, passing the butter. "Just the depot, Whitfield store, a saloon, and a handful of buildings. Most folks live on ranches and farms scattered around. It's grown some since the railway came through," Nathan added. "But it's still small enough that everyone knows everyone's business." The implied warning wasn't lost on Nora. By now, word of her abandonment would have spread through the community. She would be an object of curiosity, possibly pity, or worse. "I imagine my arrival caused quite a stir," she said quietly. Nathan's expression darkened slightly. "People will talk, but it'll blow over. Folks around here tend to judge by what they see with their own eyes, not just by stories." "Still," Nora said, "I wouldn't want to cause problems for you and Martha by association." "Nonsense," Martha said firmly. "We're not concerned with gossip." Nathan nodded in agreement, then changed the subject. "I need to check fences on the north pasture today. Might be gone most of the day." Martha turned to Nora. "Would you like to help me in the garden? The vegetables are coming in faster than I can keep up with." "I'd be happy to," Nora said quickly, relieved at the prospect of having something useful to do. "I'm not much of a gardener, but I'm willing to learn." "It's mostly just picking beans and tomatoes at this point," Martha assured her. "Nothing complicated." After breakfast, Nathan headed out while Martha showed Nora to the sizable kitchen garden behind the house. Neat rows of vegetables stretched toward a small orchard of apple and plum trees, and beehives hummed at the far edge. "This is impressive," Nora said, genuinely amazed by the abundant growth. You maintain all this yourself, Martha nodded proudly. Nathan helps with the heavy work in spring, but the rest is my domain. We try to grow enough to get us through winter with minimal trips to town. They worked side by side through the morning, picking ripe vegetables and pulling weeds. Martha proved to be a patient teacher, explaining her methods without condescension. By midday, they had filled several baskets with produce and moved inside to escape the intensifying heat. "We'll can some of these tomatoes this afternoon," Martha decided as they washed up. "And maybe make a few jars of pickles from those cucumbers." Nora hadn't done much preserving before. Gerald had always insisted on store-bought goods, but she found the process surprisingly satisfying. There was something deeply comforting about putting food by for the future, about the rhythmic work of preparation, and the gleaming jars lined up on the kitchen table afterward. "You're a quick study," Martha commented as they finished the last batch. "Most city women I've met wouldn't know where to begin with all this." "I wasn't always a city woman," Nora reminded her, "and truthfully I never quite fit into Cheyenne society. Gerald was constantly frustrated by my shortcomings in that regard." Martha snorted. "Sounds like the shortcomings were his, not yours." The blunt assessment startled a laugh from Nora. "That's a perspective I hadn't considered." "Well, consider it now," Martha advised. "From what little you've said, your husband sounds like a proper fool and you're well rid of him." The words, spoken with such matter-of-fact certainty, were oddly liberating. Nora had spent 3 years trying to mold herself into what Gerald wanted, believing her failures were her own fault. The possibility that he had been the one lacking had never crossed her mind. "You're very direct, Martha," she observed. Martha grinned. "Growing up with only a brother and ranch hands for company doesn't exactly cultivate ladylike reserve. Nathan's always telling me I need to mind my tongue more." "I find it refreshing," Nora assured her. Gerald never spoke plainly about anything. Everything was hints and implications and veiled criticisms. "Sounds exhausting," Martha commented. "No wonder you look so tired all the time." Nora touched her cheek self-consciously. "Is it that obvious?" Martha's expression softened. "Not in a bad way, just like someone who's been carrying a heavy load for too long." She glanced out the window. "Here comes Nathan, earlier than I expected." Nora followed her gaze to see Nathan riding toward the house, accompanied by another man on a dappled gray horse. Both men dismounted near the barn, and Nathan said something that made the other man laugh before they headed toward the house. "That's Tom Sullivan," Martha explained. "Owns the next ranch over. Good friend of Nathan's." She smoothed her apron and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture Nora found interesting. The men's boots thumped on the porch, and Nathan opened the door, removing his hat as he entered. "Afternoon, ladies. Hope you don't mind, but I brought Tom back for some of that apple pie I know you've been hiding, Martha." Tom Sullivan followed him in, also removing his hat. He was a tall, sandy-haired man with an open, friendly face and green eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, which he did now, nodding to Martha before his gaze settled on Nora with undisguised curiosity. "Tom, this is Mrs. Nora Blackwell," Nathan said. "She's staying with us for a while." "Mrs. Blackwell, Tom Sullivan." "Madam," Tom said, inclining his head respectfully. "Pleasure to meet you." "Likewise, Mr. Sullivan," Nora replied, noting the way his eyes darted between her and Nathan, clearly wondering about her presence but too polite to ask directly. "Tom came across that stray heifer of ours," Nathan explained, dropping into a chair at the table. "Was kind enough to help me get her back where she belonged." "Least I could do after you helped with my well last month," Tom replied, taking the seat Martha gestured to. Besides, gave me a chance to see if the rumors were true. Martha shot him a warning look, but Tom just grinned unrepentantly. Rumors travel fast, Nora observed, deciding to address the elephant in the room. Yes, my husband did leave me at the depot yesterday. Mr. Adler was kind enough to offer me shelter. Tom had the grace to look slightly abashed. No offense meant, madam, just that in a place like Desdemona, news is better than currency. He glanced at Nathan. Though I will say, you bringing home a pretty woman is definitely the most interesting news we've had in months. Nathan's ears reddened slightly. Drink your coffee and stop talking nonsense, Tom. Martha set a cup in front of each man and brought the promised pie to the table. Did you finish checking all the fences? She asked Nathan, changing the subject. Most of them, he replied, gratefully following her lead. Still need to ride the western boundary tomorrow. The conversation shifted to ranch matters, and Nora found herself relaxing as the initial awkwardness faded. Tom proved to be good company, full of amusing stories about life in the territory. By the time he took his leave a couple of hours later, Nora felt she had made another friend. Sorry about Tom's comments, Nathan said after they'd watched Tom ride away. He means well, but subtlety isn't his strong suit. It's all right, Nora assured him. Better to have things out in the open, I think. Nathan studied her for a moment, his blue eyes thoughtful. You're handling all this remarkably well. Most women I know would be. He trailed off, apparently unsure how to finish the thought. In hysterics, Nora suggested with a small smile. I've never had that luxury, Mr. Adler. My father taught me that falling apart doesn't solve problems. Nathan, he said, if you're staying under my roof, you might as well use my name. Nathan, she agreed, liking the feel of it on her tongue. And you should call me Nora, as Martha does. He nodded, a hint of a smile softening his features. Nora it is, then. The days that followed fell into a comfortable routine. Nora helped Martha with household tasks during the day and joined the siblings for meals and quiet evenings by the fire. Nathan was often out from dawn till dusk, tending to the endless work of the ranch, but he always made a point of asking about Nora's day when he returned, showing genuine interest in her activities and thoughts. A week into her stay, Nora was hanging laundry in the yard when Nathan rode in, leading a second horse, a gentle-looking chestnut mare with a white star on her forehead. Thought you might like to see more of the ranch than just the house and garden, he said when Nora approached. This is Penny. She's got a sweet temperament, good for someone who hasn't ridden much. What makes you think I haven't ridden much? Nora asked, reaching out to stroke the mare's velvet nose. Nathan looked slightly embarrassed. Just assumed, living in town and all. I grew up on the edge of the Ozarks, Nora reminded him. I've been on horseback since before I could walk properly. She smiled at his surprise. Though I will admit it's been a few years. Gerald didn't approve of women riding, said it wasn't ladylike. A flicker of disgust crossed Nathan's face. Man sounds more foolish by the day, he muttered. Well, if you're up for it, I thought we could ride out to the creek. It's pretty this time of year. The invitation, casual though it was, sent an unexpected flutter through Nora's chest. I'd like that, she said. Let me just finish hanging these sheets and change into something more suitable. 20 minutes later, she emerged from the house wearing her plainest skirt and a blouse she had borrowed from Martha, who was slightly broader in the shoulders. Nathan was waiting by the horses, and something in his expression as he watched her approach made Nora suddenly conscious of her appearance in a way she hadn't been in a long time. Ready? He asked, offering a hand to help her mount. Nora placed her foot in the stirrup and swung into the saddle with practiced ease, settling her skirts as best she could. Nathan's approving nod was oddly gratifying. They rode away from the ranch buildings at a leisurely pace, heading toward a line of trees that marked the creek bed. The late summer air was warm but not oppressive, scented with sage and pine. "Your sister tells me you've lived here since you were 12, Nora said as they rode. "That must have been quite an adjustment from wherever you were before." "St. Louis," Nathan replied. "Pa worked for the steamboat company there, but he always dreamed of having his own land. When the opportunity came to claim a homestead out here, he jumped at it. And you, did you share his dream?" Nathan considered this. "Not at first," he admitted. "I was a city boy, thought I wanted to be a riverboat pilot or some such nonsense. But this place," he gestured at the landscape around them, "it gets under your skin. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." "I can understand that," Nora said, taking in the sweeping vistas. "There's something honest about this country. It doesn't pretend to be anything it's not." Nathan glanced at her with evident surprise. "That's exactly it," he said softly. "Most people just see the harshness, the difficulties. They don't notice the beauty underneath." The observation and the way he looked at her as he made it caused Nora's cheeks to warm. She turned her attention to guiding Penny along the narrowing trail that led down to the creek. The waterway was more substantial than Nora had expected, flowing clear and swift between banks lined with cottonwoods and willows. Nathan led her to a spot where the creek widened into a shallow pool before continuing its journey. "This is where we swim in the hottest part of summer," he explained as they dismounted. "Water's too cold now, but it's still a nice place to rest." They settled on a flat rock overlooking the pool, the horses grazing contentedly nearby. For a while they simply sat in companionable silence, watching the play of light on the water. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan said eventually, his voice careful. "About your husband." Nora tensed slightly but nodded. "Of course. Why did you marry him, if that's not too personal a question?" The directness was pure Nathan, and Nora found she appreciated it. "It's a fair question," she said. "After my father died, our situation became precarious. The house was mortgaged and there were medical debts. Gerald seemed like security. He was established, respectable." She paused, reflecting. "And I suppose I was flattered by his attention. I was 20, with no prospects to speak of, and here was this successful man telling me I was beautiful and promising me a good life." "And was it a good life?" Nora stared at the water, considering how to answer truthfully without seeming pitiful. "It was comfortable," she said finally. "We wanted for nothing material, but Gerald, he wanted a certain kind of wife, someone decorative who would enhance his social standing. I was never quite right, never quite enough." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Sounds like a man who wouldn't recognize real value if it was staring him in the face." The quiet conviction in his voice warmed something inside Nora. "Thank you for saying that," she said softly. Nathan shrugged, looking slightly uncomfortable with his own vehemence. "Just stating facts as I see them." They fell silent again, but it was a different quality of silence now, charged with an awareness that hadn't been there before. Nora found herself noticing small details about Nathan, the way the sunlight caught in his hair, the strength in his hands as he absently twisted a piece of grass between his fingers, the clean line of his profile against the blue sky. "We should head back," he said eventually, rising to his feet. "Martha will wonder where we've gotten to." The ride back to the ranch was quieter, each of them absorbed in their own thoughts. As they approached the house, Nora noticed Martha on the porch, apparently watching for them. There was an urgency in her posture that immediately put Nora on alert. "Something's wrong," Nathan muttered, urging his horse to a faster pace. As they reached the yard, Martha came down the steps quickly. "Nathan, there's a man here looking for Nora," she said, her expression troubled. "Says he's an attorney from Cheyenne." Nora felt her stomach drop. This could only be related to Gerald. "Where is he?" she asked, dismounting hastily. In the house. I gave him coffee, but he's not the friendly sort. Nathan's face had hardened. You don't have to see him if you don't want to, he told Nora. I can send him on his way. The offer was tempting, but Nora shook her head. No, I need to know what this is about. She straightened her shoulders. Would you come with me, though? Of course, Nathan said immediately, his expression softening. They entered the house to find a thin, austere man in a dark suit sitting at the kitchen table, a barely touched cup of coffee in front of him. He rose as they entered, his eyes fixing on Nora with clinical detachment. Mrs. Blackwell, he inquired, though it wasn't really a question. Yes, Nora confirmed, resisting the urge to smooth her wind-tousled hair. And you are Clarence Pearson, attorney at law, the man replied, producing a card from his waistcoat pocket. I represent your husband in the matter of your marriage dissolution. The formal, cold phrasing sent a chill through Nora. I see, she said, proud of how steady her voice remained. And what does Mr. Blackwell propose? Pearson reached into his briefcase and withdrew a document. This is a bill of divorcement citing abandonment as the grounds. Mr. Blackwell is prepared to be generous in the settlement, given the circumstances. His tone suggested he found the entire situation distasteful. Abandonment, Nathan interjected incredulously. He's the one who left her at a depot. Pearson regarded him with thinly veiled disdain. And who might you be, sir? Nathan Adler. This is my home, and Mrs. Blackwell is under my protection. The attorney's eyebrows rose slightly at this declaration. Indeed. Well, that rather proves the point about abandonment, doesn't it? Nora felt her cheeks burn with humiliation and anger. Are you suggesting that I abandoned my husband by accepting shelter when he left me with nowhere to go? I'm merely presenting the legal position, madam, Pearson replied smoothly. The fact that you are residing with an unmarried man barely a week after separating from your husband would be compelling evidence in court. Nathan took a step forward, his hands clenching at his sides. Now you listen here, Nathan, Nora interrupted, placing a restraining hand on his arm. Let me handle this. She turned back to Pearson. What exactly does the settlement entail? The attorney seemed slightly disappointed at being denied a confrontation, but quickly reverted to professional detachment. Mr. Blackwell is prepared to provide a lump sum of $500 on the condition that you sign these papers immediately and make no further claims on his estate. $500 was not an insignificant amount, but it was a pittance compared to Gerald's wealth. Still, it would be enough for Nora to establish herself somewhere, perhaps even return to Missouri if she wished. And if I refuse? She asked, more to understand her options than out of any real intention to fight. Pearson's thin lips curved in what might generously be called a smile. Then Mr. Blackwell will pursue the divorce through the courts, with all the attendant publicity and scrutiny. Given your current living arrangement, I would not advise this course of action. The implied threat was clear. Gerald would drag her name through the mud, using her presence at Cross Timber Ranch as evidence of moral failing. It would be her word against his, and Gerald had money and influence on his side. Nathan's arm had tensed beneath her hand, and she could feel the anger radiating from him. Martha, who had been silently observing from the doorway, looked equally outraged. May I review the papers? Nora asked, keeping her voice level. Pearson nodded and placed the document on the table. Nora sat down and began to read carefully, conscious of Nathan hovering protectively nearby. The legal language was dense, but the terms were essentially as Pearson had stated, a clean break, with the settlement to be paid upon signing. It was, in many ways, a better outcome than Nora had dared hope for. Freedom from Gerald, with enough money to start over somewhere. Yet something about the cold calculation of it all the way Gerald had planned this, probably for months, made her heart ache with a complex mixture of grief and relief. "Do you have a pen, Mr. Pearson?" she asked finally. The attorney produced one from his coat pocket. Nora took it, her hand steady as she signed her name to the document. "Very good," Pearson said, taking back the papers and returning them to his briefcase. "The funds will be transferred to the bank in Desdemona within 10 business days. You will need to present yourself there to collect them." He withdrew an envelope from his pocket. "This is a draft for $50 to tide you over until then." Nora accepted the envelope with as much dignity as she could muster. "Thank you for making the journey to deliver this personally," she said, the politeness automatic even in such circumstances. Pearson inclined his head slightly. Mr. Blackwell thought it best to resolve the matter promptly. He closed his briefcase with a snap. "I'll take my leave now. Good day to you, Mrs. Blackwell." He nodded curtly to Nathan and Martha before heading for the door. Nathan followed him out, presumably to see him to his horse. When he was gone, Martha moved to Nora's side, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. Nora nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure it was true. "It's for the best," she said. "A clean break, as they say." Martha snorted. "There's nothing clean about what that man did. Abandonment, indeed. The nerve of it." Despite everything, Nora found herself smiling at Martha's indignation. "It's just legal maneuvering," she said. "And truthfully, I don't care what reason is given as long as I'm free of him." Nathan returned, his expression thunderous. "Man had the gall to warn me about harboring another man's wife," he reported, dropping into a chair across from Nora. "I nearly put him over his horse backward." "I'm glad you didn't," Nora said. "It would only have complicated matters." She looked down at the envelope in her hands. "I should find somewhere else to stay now that this is settled. I don't want to cause any more gossip for you both." "Nonsense," Martha said firmly. "You'll stay right here until you decide what you want to do next, won't she, Nathan?" Nathan's blue eyes met Nora's, serious and direct. "This is your home for as long as you need it," he said simply. "No matter what anyone says." The sincerity in his voice brought unexpected tears to Nora's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Both of you." Martha squeezed her shoulder before moving away to stoke the fire. "I think we could all use some tea," she announced. "And maybe something stronger for you, Nathan." Nathan's mood gradually lightened as they sat around the kitchen table. The familiar ritual of tea drinking providing a sense of normalcy after the unsettling encounter. By the time they had finished their second cups, he was even able to joke about Pearson's pinched expression when confronted with Martha's blunt questioning. "I thought he might faint when you asked if Gerald had already moved his new woman in," he told his sister, a reluctant grin tugging at his mouth. Martha looked unrepentant. It was a perfectly reasonable question. Nora found herself laughing despite the emotional turmoil of the day. "I suspect the answer is yes," she said. "Gerald isn't one to waste time, especially if there's social advancement to be gained." As evening fell, Nora excused herself to the bedroom, needing some time alone to process everything that had happened. She sat on the edge of the bed, the envelope containing the draft placed beside her. It represented both an ending and a beginning, the final severance of her ties to Gerald, but also the means to forge a new path for herself. The question was, what did she want that path to be? She could return to Missouri, though there was little waiting for her there besides memories. She could try to establish herself in Desdemona or another nearby town, perhaps using her medical knowledge to serve the community in some capacity. Or she could venture further afield to Denver or even San Francisco, places where a woman alone might find more opportunities. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Nora, it's Nathan. Can I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course," she replied, quickly wiping away the tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. Nathan entered, his tall frame seeming to fill the small room. He remained standing near the door, hands clasped behind his back, an unusual formality in his posture. "I just wanted to make sure you were truly all right," he said. "Today was difficult." "I'm fine," Nora assured him, though her voice caught slightly on the words. "Or I will be anyway. It's strange to think that after 3 years my marriage can be ended with just a signature." Nathan nodded, his expression somber. "For what it's worth, I think you're handling it with remarkable grace." "Thank you." Nora managed a small smile. "I've been thinking about what to do next. With the settlement money, I have options I didn't have a week ago." Something flickered in Nathan's eyes, concern, perhaps, or something deeper that Nora couldn't quite identify. "You don't have to decide right away," he said. "Like I said before, you're welcome here as long as you need." "That's very generous, but I can't impose indefinitely." "You and Martha have already done more than enough." Nathan shifted his weight, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "It's not an imposition," he said finally. "Having you here has been nice for both of us." He cleared his throat. "Martha especially appreciates having another woman around." "Gets tired of just my company, I expect." The slight deflection wasn't lost on Nora, but she chose not to press. "She's wonderful," she said sincerely. "You both are. I don't know what would have happened to me if you hadn't been at that depot." "Someone else would have helped," Nathan said with typical modesty. "Folks around here look out for each other." "Perhaps," Nora conceded, "but I'm glad it was you." Their eyes met for a long moment, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of a connection that had been building steadily since that first day. Nathan broke the gaze first, glancing down at his boots. "Well, I should let you rest," he said. "Good night, Nora." "Good night, Nathan," she replied softly, watching as he slipped back out the door. Sleep was elusive that night, her mind too full of swirling thoughts and emotions. By dawn, Nora had made at least one decision: she would stay at Cross Timber for a little while longer, until she was certain of her next steps. The rest would have to wait. The days that followed settled into a new rhythm. Nora continued to help Martha with household tasks, but she also began to venture further into ranch life. She learned to collect eggs from the obstinate hens, helped with the milking, and even assisted Nathan with treating a horse that had cut its leg on a strand of wire. "You've got a steady hand," he commented as she expertly bandaged the wound. "Better than mine, that's for sure." Nora smiled at the compliment. "Years of helping my father," she reminded him. "Though I will say horses make better patients than most humans. They don't complain nearly as much." Nathan laughed, the sound warming Nora in a way that had become increasingly familiar. These small moments of connection had been growing more frequent, a shared glance over the dinner table, his hand lingering when he passed her tools, the way he seemed to find reasons to be wherever she was working. Martha noticed, too, if her knowing smiles were any indication. She had taken to finding errands in town that required her presence, leaving Nathan and Nora alone at the ranch for hours at a time. "Your sister isn't very subtle," Nora observed one afternoon as they watched Martha ride away on yet another supposed mission to Desdemona. Nathan's ears reddened slightly. "No, subtlety isn't a family trait, I'm afraid." "It's refreshing, actually," Nora said. After Gerald's constant games and hidden meanings, they were sitting on the porch shelling peas for dinner. Nathan's hands, so large and capable with ranch work, moved with surprising deftness on the delicate task. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said after a moment. Nora nodded, curious. "Of course." Were you ever happy with him? Your husband, I mean." The question caught her off guard, but she considered it seriously. "In the beginning, perhaps," she said slowly, "when it still felt like an adventure, but I think even then I was more in love with the idea of him than the man himself." She paused, reflecting. "The real Gerald was always somewhere beneath the surface, and once I started to see him clearly, happiness became elusive." Nathan was quiet for a moment, his hand still among the pea pods. "You deserve better," he said finally, his voice low but firm. "Someone who sees your true worth." The simple statement, delivered without flourish or pretense, touched Nora deeply. "That's a kind thing to say." "It's not kindness, it's truth," Nathan replied, meeting her eyes directly. "You're an extraordinary woman, Nora, smart, capable, strong. Any man would be fortunate to have you at his side." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken feelings. For a breathless moment, Nora thought he might say more, might give voice to what was clearly growing between them. But then a rider appeared on the horizon, breaking the spell. "That's Tom," Nathan said, standing up. "Wasn't expecting him today." Nora felt both disappointment and relief as the moment passed. Whatever was developing between them, she wasn't sure she was ready to define it yet, not when her divorce was barely settled. Tom Sullivan rode into the yard with his usual good cheer, though today he seemed particularly animated. "Nathan," he called as he dismounted. "Mrs. Blackwell." "Good to see you both." "What brings you by, Tom?" Nathan asked, stepping off the porch to greet his friend. "News from town," Tom replied, tipping his hat to Nora. "Thought you'd want to hear it firsthand." Nora tensed slightly, news involving her, no doubt. "What is it, Mr. Sullivan?" Tom's expression was sympathetic. "Your former husband was in Desdemona yesterday, madam, with his new bride." The words landed like a physical blow, even though Nora had expected something of the sort. "Already?" she managed to ask. "It's been barely 3 weeks since the papers were signed." Tom nodded grimly. "Apparently they were married in Cheyenne the day after your divorce was finalized. They're staying at the hotel while he oversees some business with the railway." Nathan's face had darkened dangerously. "The gall of that man," he muttered. "Parading his new wife through the very town where he abandoned his last one." "There's more," Tom said, his voice lowering. "They're hosting some kind of reception at the hotel tomorrow evening, invited all the prominent folks from the area." Nora felt sick at the thought of Gerald entertaining the local society, while she was still reeling from the dissolution of their marriage. It was exactly the kind of calculated cruelty he was capable of. "Thank you for telling me, Mr. Sullivan," she said, proud of how steady her voice remained. "Now I can be sure to avoid town tomorrow." Tom looked relieved at her calm reaction. "That's probably wise, madam, though for what it's worth, most folks think poorly of him for it. Even Judge Wilson said it showed a lack of proper respect." This small evidence of community support was unexpectedly comforting. Nora had been so focused on avoiding gossip that she hadn't considered people might actually be on her side. "Would you like some coffee, Mr. Sullivan?" she offered, falling back on hospitality to cover her emotional turmoil. "Thank you, madam, but I can't stay," Tom replied. "Just wanted to make sure you heard it from a friend rather than stumbling across them in town." He glanced at Nathan. "Your sister's at Whitfield's store, by the way, said she'd be back before supper." After Tom rode away, Nora and Nathan returned to the porch in silence. The peaceful mood of earlier had evaporated, replaced by a tension that seemed to vibrate between them. "I'm sorry," Nathan said finally, "about Gerald being here. It's the last thing you needed." Nora shook her head. "It's not your fault. And honestly, I'm not surprised. Gerald always did have a flair for the dramatic." She attempted a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. At least now I know to stay away from town for a few days." "You shouldn't have to hide," Nathan said, a note of anger threading through his voice. "This is your community now, too." The possessive phrasing, "your community," warmed something inside Nora despite her distress. "It's kind of you to say so, but the reality is, I'm still just a visitor here. Gerald, with his money and connections, will always be more welcome in places like Desdemona." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Not by everyone," he said firmly. "Not by the people who matter." Nora was touched by his fierce loyalty. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means a great deal to me." They finished shelling the peas in companionable silence, the rhythm of the work soothing Nora's rattled nerves. By the time Martha returned, she had regained her composure enough to discuss the news calmly. "We should go to the reception," Martha declared unexpectedly after hearing about Gerald's presence in town. Nathan nearly choked on his coffee. "What? You heard me," Martha said, her eyes gleaming with determination. "We should all three go to the reception at the hotel. Show that man that Nora has nothing to be ashamed of." "Martha, that's not necessary," Nora protested. "I have no desire to see Gerald or his new wife." "It's not about them," Martha insisted. "It's about you holding your head high. About showing everyone in Desdemona that you're not some discarded wife hiding in shame." Nathan was studying his sister with a mixture of exasperation and admiration. "You've always had a flair for the dramatic, Martha, but this might be taking it too far." Martha crossed her arms stubbornly. "Think about it. If Nora doesn't show her face in town now, people will assume she's hiding because she's heartbroken or humiliated. Is that the impression you want to give, Nora?" Put that way, the idea had a certain compelling logic. Nora had spent 3 years with Gerald trying to avoid scandal and gossip, always concerned with appearances. Perhaps it was time for a different approach. "You might have a point," she admitted slowly, "though I don't have anything suitable to wear to such an event." Martha waved this concern away. "We're about the same size. I have a blue silk dress I bought in Denver last year that would look lovely on you." She turned to her brother. "And you can wear your good suit, Nathan, the one you wore to the governor's reception in Cheyenne." Nathan looked deeply uncomfortable. "I don't know about this, Martha. It could make things worse for Nora. Or it could show Gerald that he doesn't have the power to hurt her anymore," Martha countered. "That she has friends who stand by her." She looked to Nora. "What do you think, truly?" Nora considered the question carefully. The thought of facing Gerald and his new wife made her stomach knot with anxiety, but there was also something appealing about the idea of showing him that she wasn't broken by his abandonment. That she had, in fact, found a place where she was valued and respected. "I think," she said slowly, "that I'd like to go, with both of you." Nathan's expression softened as he looked at her. "You're sure? You don't have to prove anything to anyone." "Maybe I need to prove something to myself," Nora replied. "That I'm stronger than Gerald thought I was." A slow smile spread across Nathan's face, full of pride and something warmer that made Nora's heart flutter. "Then we'll go," he said, "all 3 of us." The decision made, Martha threw herself into preparations with characteristic enthusiasm. The blue silk dress was retrieved from storage, aired out, and adjusted to fit Nora perfectly. Nathan's good suit was pressed, and even Martha decided to wear her best dress, a deep green creation that complemented her coloring beautifully. By the time they set out for Desdemona the following evening, Nora's initial bravado had been replaced by a nervous tension that made her hands tremble slightly as Nathan helped her into the wagon. "We don't have to do this," he reminded her, noticing her anxiety. "We can turn around any time." Nora took a deep breath, steadying herself. "No, I want to go. It's just, I haven't seen Gerald since the depot. I'm not sure how I'll react." Nathan covered her gloved hand with his own. "However you react will be just fine," he assured her. "Just remember, you're not facing him alone this time." The simple reassurance was exactly what Nora needed. She nodded, squeezing his hand gratefully before he released it to take up the reins. The hotel in Desdemona was the largest building in town, a two-story structure with aspirations of grandeur that weren't quite realized in its execution. Still, for the frontier, it was impressive enough, and tonight it was lit up with lanterns and buzzing with activity. Nathan helped both women down from the wagon, offering Nora his arm as they approached the entrance. She took it gratefully, drawing strength from his solid presence beside her. Inside, the hotel's main parlor had been cleared for the reception. Perhaps 30 people were already present, clustered in small groups around the room. A table along one wall held refreshments, and someone was playing a slightly out-of-tune piano in the corner. Nora scanned the room quickly, her heart racing. Gerald was easy to spot. He stood near the center of the room, impeccably dressed as always, holding court with several men who appeared to be business associates. Beside him was a young woman in an elaborate dress that must have cost more than most people in Desdemona earned in a year. "That's him," Martha murmured, following Nora's gaze. "The one who looks like he's swallowed a poker." Despite her nervousness, Nora had to stifle a laugh at the apt description. "That's Gerald, and I assume the young lady beside him is his new wife." Nathan's arm tightened slightly under her hand. "Are you all right?" "Yes," Nora said, surprising herself with the truth of it. Seeing Gerald again was strange, but she felt none of the crushing pain she might have expected. If anything, she felt a curious detachment, as if observing a person she had once known but no longer had any real connection to. "Let's get some punch," Martha suggested, leading the way toward the refreshment table. "Then we can mingle a bit, show everyone you're not hiding away in shame." They had just reached the table when a woman Nora recognized as the banker's wife approached. "Mrs. Blackwell, isn't it?" she inquired, her eyes darting curiously between Nora and Nathan. "I'm Margaret Wilson. My husband is the president of Desdemona Bank." "Mrs. Wilson," Nora acknowledged politely. "Yes, I'm Nora Blackwell. May I introduce Nathan and Martha Adler? I've been staying at their ranch while I settle my affairs." Mrs. Wilson's eyebrows rose slightly, but her smile remained fixed. "How nice. Mr. Adler's ranch has quite a reputation in the area. You must find it quite rustic after Cheyenne." The subtle dig wasn't lost on Nora, but before she could respond, Nathan spoke up. "Mrs. Blackwell has taken to ranch life remarkably well," he said, his voice carrying just enough to draw attention from nearby guests. "She's quite skilled with horses and has a healer's touch with injuries. We consider ourselves fortunate to have her with us." The genuine admiration in his voice brought a flush to Nora's cheeks. Mrs. Wilson looked momentarily nonplussed, clearly having expected a different dynamic. "How versatile of you, Mrs. Blackwell," she managed. "I had no idea you possessed such practical talents." "There's a great deal about me that isn't widely known, Mrs. Wilson," Nora replied smoothly. "I've found that life on the frontier requires adaptability." Martha suppressed a grin behind her cup of punch. Mrs. Wilson made a few more minutes of strained conversation before excusing herself, no doubt to share this interesting development with the other gossips in attendance. "That wasn't so bad," Nora murmured to Nathan. "Though I suspect we've just become the main topic of conversation." "Let them talk," Nathan said with a shrug. "Nothing they say can hurt you unless you let it." His simple confidence was infectious, and Nora found herself relaxing slightly as they moved through the room, exchanging polite greetings with various guests. Most were cordial enough, if curious, and a few seemed genuinely pleased to see her. It was inevitable, of course, that they would eventually cross paths with Gerald. It happened as they were speaking with Tom Sullivan, who had arrived shortly after them. Nora sensed Gerald's approach before she saw him, a prickle of awareness raising the hair on the back of her neck. "Nora." Gerald's voice was perfectly modulated, betraying no emotion. What an unexpected surprise! Nora turned to face him, grateful for Nathan's steady presence at her side. "Gerald," she replied evenly. "Congratulations on your marriage." Gerald's eyes narrowed slightly at her composure. He had clearly expected her to be either absent or distraught. "Thank you," he said. "Allow me to introduce my wife, Elizabeth." "Elizabeth, this is Nora Blackwell, a former acquaintance." The reduction of their 3-year marriage to "a former acquaintance" was so breathtakingly dismissive that Nora heard Nathan's sharp intake of breath beside her. The young woman with Gerald, barely 20, Nora guessed, offered a hesitant smile. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Blackwell," Elizabeth said, her voice betraying a nervous uncertainty that made Nora feel an unexpected pang of sympathy. This girl was hardly to blame for Gerald's actions. "Likewise, Mrs. Blackwell," Nora replied kindly. "I hope you're enjoying your time in Desdemona." Gerald's gaze shifted to Nathan, who hadn't bothered to hide his contempt. "And you are Nathan Adler," Nathan replied coldly, "owner of the Cross Timber Ranch." "Ah, yes," Gerald said, his tone suggesting he found the introduction illuminating. "I've heard about you, the cowboy who befriended my former wife so quickly after our unfortunate parting." The insinuation was clear in his voice. "Mr. Adler and his sister have been kind enough to offer me hospitality," Nora interjected before Nathan could respond. "Something I found myself in need of after being abandoned at the depot." A flicker of discomfort crossed Gerald's face at the direct reference to his actions. Beside him, Elizabeth looked confused and uncomfortable. "Well," Gerald said, recovering quickly, "it seems everything has worked out for the best then. You've found accommodations that suit your nature, and I've found a wife more suited to my position." He placed a possessive hand on Elizabeth's arm. "If you'll excuse us, we should continue greeting our guests." As they walked away, Nora released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That was unpleasant," she murmured. "The man's a jackass," Tom Sullivan said bluntly, having observed the entire exchange. "Pardon my language, ladies," Martha snorted. "I'd have used stronger words myself." Nathan was watching Nora with concern. "Are you all right?" To her surprise, Nora found that she was. The encounter, while uncomfortable, had confirmed something important. She truly was better off without Gerald. Seeing him with his new wife, hearing his thinly veiled insults, had only reinforced how little she had lost when their marriage ended. "I'm fine," she assured Nathan. "Better than fine, actually. I think I needed to see him like this to remember exactly who he is." Relief washed over Nathan's features. "Good. Because for a moment there, I was considering dragging him outside for a discussion about manners." The mental image of proper, polished Gerald facing off against Nathan's solid strength made Nora smile despite herself. As satisfying as that might be, I think it's better to simply enjoy the evening and show everyone that I'm not devastated by his rejection. "That's my girl," Martha said approvingly before catching herself. "I mean, that's the spirit, Nora." The slip was casual but meaningful, suggesting Nora had become more than just a temporary guest in the Adlers' lives. The thought warmed her as they continued to mingle, eventually finding themselves in conversation with Judge Wilson and his wife. "Mrs. Blackwell," the judge said, his manner courteous but reserved. "I understand your divorce was recently finalized." "Yes, Judge," Nora confirmed. About 3 weeks ago. Rather unusual circumstances, he commented, studying her face. I must say, you seem to be bearing up remarkably well. There was a question hidden in the statement, and Nora decided to answer it directly. I've been fortunate in finding good friends, she said, glancing at Nathan and Martha, and in discovering that there can be life after an unexpected ending. The judge nodded thoughtfully. Indeed, new beginnings often follow endings if one has the courage to embrace them. He looked between Nora and Nathan with shrewd assessment. And courage seems to be something you have in abundance, Mrs. Blackwell. The conversation moved on to more general topics, but Nora caught Nathan watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. There was admiration there, certainly, but also something deeper, something that spoke of possibilities neither of them had yet put into words. As the evening progressed, Nora found herself genuinely enjoying the company of many of Desdemona's residents. Without Gerald's constraining presence, she felt free to be herself, to laugh at Tom Sullivan's outrageous stories, to discuss herbal remedies with the doctor's wife, to express opinions without worrying whether they aligned with her husband's. By the time they prepared to leave, Nora realized with surprise that she had actually enjoyed herself. The dreaded confrontation with Gerald had come and gone, leaving her feeling stronger rather than diminished. Ready to head home? Nathan asked as he helped her with her wrap. Home. The word resonated in a way Nora hadn't expected. Cross Timber Ranch had indeed become a home to her over the past weeks, not just a shelter, but a place where she felt valued and at peace. Yes, she said softly. I'm ready to go home. The night air was cool as they stepped outside, the stars brilliant in the clear Wyoming sky. Martha, claiming fatigue, climbed into the back of the wagon and promptly wrapped herself in a blanket, leaving Nora and Nathan to sit together on the front bench. As they drove away from Desdemona, Nathan glanced at Nora in the moonlight. You were magnificent tonight, he said quietly. The way you handled Gerald, the way you carried yourself with everyone, I was proud to be at your side. The simple compliment meant more to Nora than all the elaborate flattery Gerald had ever offered. Thank you for being there, she replied. For supporting me. It made all the difference. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the rhythmic clip-clop of the horses' hooves the only sound in the night. Behind them, Martha's soft snores suggested she had actually fallen asleep or was doing a very convincing impression of it. Nora, Nathan said eventually, his voice low. I've been meaning to ask you something. Her heart quickened at his serious tone. Yes, your divorce is final now. You've got that settlement money coming. You could go anywhere, start fresh wherever you wanted. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. Have you given any more thought to what you'll do next? It was a question Nora had been asking herself with increasing frequency. The truth was, she had considered several possibilities, but kept returning to one that both excited and frightened her. I have, she admitted. Though I'm not entirely certain of my path yet. Nathan nodded, his eyes on the road ahead. That's understandable. No need to rush into decisions. Nora studied his profile in the moonlight, the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow of concentration between his brows. In the weeks she had known him, Nathan Adler had shown himself to be everything Gerald was not: honest, hardworking, kind without expectation of return. She had grown to respect him deeply, and somewhere along the way, that respect had blossomed into something more profound. There is one possibility I keep coming back to, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan glanced at her, a flicker of something hopeful in his eyes. Oh, I've been thinking I might stay in the area, Nora continued carefully. Perhaps find a small place in or near Desdemona. Use some of my father's medical knowledge to help people who can't get to a doctor easily. That sounds like a fine plan, Nathan said, though she detected a note of disappointment beneath his supportive words. The community could certainly use someone with healing skills. Nora gathered her courage. The thing is, I've grown rather attached to certain aspects of my current situation. What aspects would those be? Nathan asked, his voice carefully neutral. The ranch itself is beautiful, Nora said, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he must hear it. The work is satisfying in a way I never experienced in town, and the company. She paused, searching for the right words. The company has become very dear to me. Nathan's hands tightened on the reins, but he kept his eyes on the road ahead. Nora, he said, her name like a caress on his lips. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that I've found something at Cross Timber that I never had with Gerald, Nora replied softly. A sense of belonging, of value, of— She hesitated, then pushed ahead. Of possibility. The wagon slowed as Nathan pulled gently on the reins, bringing the horses to a stop in the middle of the moonlit road. He turned to face her fully, his expression intense in the silvery light. I want you to stay, he said simply, directly, in that forthright way that was so essentially Nathan. Not as a guest, not temporarily, I want you to stay permanently. Nora's breath caught. Are you asking? I'm not asking anything tonight, Nathan clarified quickly. It's too soon for that, I know. You've only just gotten free of one marriage. You don't need another man making claims on you right away. He ran a hand through his hair, uncharacteristically flustered. But I want you to know that if you decided to stay, to make Desdemona and Cross Timber your home, it would make me the happiest man in Wyoming territory. The declaration, honest and unadorned, touched Nora deeply. Nathan, she said, reaching for his hand, I can't make any promises right now. You're right, I need time to find my footing as my own person again. But I do know that when I think about my future, I can't imagine it without you in it. Nathan's fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. That's enough for now, he said softly. Just knowing there's a chance. From the back of the wagon came a poorly suppressed sniff. Are you two quite finished? Martha's voice called. Because if you are, I'd appreciate getting home before sunrise. It's cold back here. Nathan's startled laugh broke the intensity of the moment. Were you eavesdropping, Martha? Of course I was, his sister replied unrepentantly, sitting up and adjusting her blanket. Someone has to make sure you don't botch this completely, brother. You're lucky I didn't interrupt sooner to tell you to stop being so blasted noble and just kiss the woman. Martha. Nora exclaimed, caught between embarrassment and amusement. Nathan was shaking his head, but there was affection in his exasperation. My apologies for my sister's lack of boundaries, he told Nora. Though in her defense, she's been pushing me to speak up for weeks now. Has she? Nora asked, feeling a smile tug at her lips. Incessantly, Nathan confirmed. Said I was mooning around like a lovesick calf. Because you were, Martha interjected. Now, can we please continue this conversation at home, preferably in front of a fire? Nathan chuckled and released Nora's hand to take up the reins again. Your wish is my command, sister. He clicked to the horses, and the wagon resumed its journey toward Cross Timber. The rest of the ride passed in a comfortable silence charged with new awareness. When they reached the ranch, Nathan helped both women down, his hand lingering on Nora's waist just a moment longer than strictly necessary. Martha yawned dramatically as they entered the house. I'm absolutely exhausted, she announced. Think I'll head straight to bed. Good night, both of you. She disappeared down the hallway with a speed that left little doubt about her intentions to give them privacy. Left alone in the main room, Nora and Nathan stood looking at each other in the soft glow of the lamp Martha had lit before her hasty departure. "Your sister isn't very subtle," Nora observed, echoing her comment from days earlier. "No," Nathan agreed with a smile, "but her heart's in the right place." He moved to stoke the dying embers in the fireplace, adding a few pieces of wood until a small flame flickered to life. Nora watched him, admiring the economical grace of his movements, the careful competence he brought to every task. "I meant what I said in the wagon," she said as he straightened up. "I do need time, but I also meant it when I said I can't imagine my future without you." Nathan turned to face her, his expression serious but gentle. "I can wait," he said simply, "however long you need." Something about his patient certainty, his willingness to give her the space to find herself while making it clear he would be there when she was ready, broke down the last of Nora's hesitation. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "There is one thing I don't think we need to wait for," she said softly. Nathan's eyes darkened with understanding. "And what would that be?" he asked, his voice husky. Instead of answering, Nora raised herself on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. For a heartbeat, Nathan remained still, as if afraid any movement might shatter the moment. Then, with a soft sound that might have been her name, he gathered her into his arms, returning her kiss with a gentle passion that made her heart soar. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the day I found you at the depot," he admitted. Nora smiled, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. "Then why did you wait so long?" "Seemed improper, given the circumstances," he replied with a hint of rueful humor. "And I wasn't sure if you felt the same way." "I wasn't sure either at first," Nora confessed. "Everything happened so quickly. But somewhere along the way, working beside you, talking with you in the evenings, seeing the kind of man you truly are, something changed. Or perhaps it was there from the beginning, and I just needed time to recognize it." Nathan brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch reverent. "Whatever the timing, I'm grateful it happened," he said softly. "When I saw you standing there at the depot, looking so lost but still holding yourself with such dignity, something inside me just knew." "Knew what?" Nora asked, though she thought she already understood. "That you were someone special," Nathan replied. "Someone I wanted to know, to protect to." He hesitated, perhaps wary of saying too much too soon. "To love," Nora finished for him, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's eyes, so blue and honest, held her steadily. "Yes," he said simply. "To love." The word, spoken plainly and without flourish, filled Nora with a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire burning beside them. This was not Gerald's calculated courtship, full of grandiose promises and hidden conditions. This was something real, a true connection between equals, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. "I think I could love you too, Nathan Adler," she admitted softly. "I think perhaps I already do." His smile then was worth every hardship that had led her to this moment. "Then we have all the time in the world to discover what that means," he said, drawing her close once more. As Nora settled into his embrace, she marveled at the strange twists of fate that had brought her here. When Gerald had left her at the Desdemona depot, she had thought her life was ending. Instead, it had been just beginning. The morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the window of Nora's room and rousing her from the most peaceful sleep she had enjoyed in years. For a moment, she simply lay there, reliving the events of the previous evening, the reception, the confrontation with Gerald, and most significantly, her conversation with Nathan. A soft knock at her door was followed by Martha's voice. "Nora, are you awake? Breakfast is nearly ready." "I'll be right out," Nora called, sitting up and reaching for her robe. In the kitchen, she found Martha alone, frying bacon and mixing batter for biscuits. "Nathan's already out checking on a heifer that's close to calving," Martha explained. Said to tell you good morning and that he'd be back by midday. There was a question in Martha's eyes, but she refrained from asking it directly, focusing instead on pouring batter into the hot skillet. We talked last night, Nora offered, feeling that Martha deserved some acknowledgement of her role in bringing them together. After you so subtly retired early, Martha's face lit up with undisguised delight. And, don't keep me in suspense, Nora. And, we've reached an understanding, Nora said, unable to keep the smile from her face. I'm going to stay, at least for now, to see where this leads. Martha abandoned her cooking to embrace Nora tightly. I knew it, she exclaimed. The way he looks at you, I've never seen Nathan so smitten. And you've been just as bad, though you hide it better. Nora returned the hug, touched by Martha's genuine happiness. I hope you don't mind sharing your home a bit longer. Mind? Martha pulled back, her expression incredulous. Nora, I've been praying for Nathan to find someone like you for years. Someone who appreciates him for who he is, not just for what he has. Someone who fits into our life here. The enthusiastic endorsement warmed Nora's heart. Thank you, Martha. That means a great deal to me. Martha returned to the stove, rescuing the bacon just before it burned. So, what happens next? Will you go to town to collect your settlement money soon? I should, Nora acknowledged. It should be available at the bank by now, and I need to think about what to do with it. You could always invest in the ranch, Martha suggested casually, though her eyes were keen. Nathan's been talking about expanding, breeding more horses. Capital is always useful for that sort of venture. The suggestion was practical, but also loaded with implication that Nora might tie her future to cross timber in a tangible, permanent way. That's a possibility, Nora agreed carefully. Though I was also thinking I might use some of it to set up a small practice in Desdemona. Nothing formal, just a place where people could come for basic medical care when the doctor isn't available. Martha nodded approvingly. That's a fine idea. Folks around here are always hurting themselves, and Laramie's too far to go for every cut and fever. She slid a plate of bacon and biscuits onto the table. And it wouldn't have to be either slash or, you could do both, help at the ranch and have your practice in town. It was a compelling vision, one that would allow Nora to maintain her independence while also building a future with Nathan. I'll need to think on it some more, she said, but I like the idea. After breakfast, Nora helped Martha with the washing, hanging sheets and clothes on the line behind the house to dry in the brisk autumn air. As they worked, Martha shared stories of growing up at Cross Timber, of the early difficult years when the ranch was just starting, of her parents' determination to make a life in this wild country. Pa always said the land would provide if we were willing to work with it, not against it, she recalled, pegging a shirt to the line. And Ma said that hardships were just opportunities wearing disguises. They sound like remarkable people, Nora said. I wish I could have known them. Martha smiled wistfully. They would have liked you, especially Ma. She was always worried Nathan would end up alone after she was gone, said he was too serious, too devoted to the ranch to properly court a woman. He is serious, Nora agreed, but that's part of what I admire about him. He takes his responsibilities to heart. That he does, Martha said. Sometimes too much so. That's why he needs someone like you to remind him there's more to life than work and duty. The conversation gave Nora a deeper understanding of the man she was growing to love, of the forces that had shaped him into the person he was today. It also reinforced her conviction that staying at Cross Timber was the right choice, at least for now. By the time Nathan returned shortly after midday, Nora had made a decision. She found him in the barn, brushing down his horse after the morning's ride. "How's the heifer?" she asked, leaning against the stall door. Nathan looked up with a smile that warmed her from head to toe. Doing well. Should be calving in the next day or two. He set down the brush and moved toward her. Sleep well. Very, Nora replied, suddenly shy under his intent gaze. Martha and I were just talking about going into town tomorrow. I should check at the bank about my settlement money. Nathan nodded. Of course, I'll drive you in. Actually, I was thinking of riding. Penny seems comfortable with me now. She hesitated, then added, and I'd like to stop by the doctor's office while I'm there, to introduce myself and see if he might be receptive to having someone assist him occasionally. Nathan's eyebrows rose slightly. You're thinking of working with Doc Miller in a limited capacity, Nora explained. My father taught me a great deal, and it seems a waste not to use that knowledge, especially in a place where medical help is so scarce. Nathan considered this for a moment, then broke into a broad smile. I think it's a wonderful idea, he said. Doc Miller's getting on in years, and he's been complaining for ages that he can't handle all the territory he's supposed to cover. Encouraged by his support, Nora continued, I was also thinking that some of my settlement money might be put to good use here at Cross Timber. Martha mentioned you've been wanting to expand the horse breeding operation. Nathan's expression turned serious. Nora, I don't want you to think you need to invest in the ranch to stay here. You're welcome regardless. I know that, she assured him. But if my future is here and I believe it is, then it makes sense to invest in that future, doesn't it? As a partner, not just a guest. The word partner hung between them, loaded with meaning. Nathan stepped closer, taking her hands in his. Are you sure about this? He asked softly. About us. Nora met his gaze steadily. I'm sure that I want to build something here with you, with Martha, with this land. I'm sure that when you picked me up at that depot and said come home, some part of me recognized that this was where I belonged. She squeezed his hands. Is that sure enough? Nathan's answer was to draw her close and kiss her, a gentle but thorough kiss that spoke volumes about his feelings. When they parted, his eyes were bright with emotion. It's sure enough for me, he said simply. The next day, Nora and Martha rode into Desdemona, leaving Nathan to deal with the imminent calving. The town was quiet, with just a few people going about their business on the main street. Nora was conscious of curious glances as they dismounted in front of the bank, but they were more speculative than hostile. Inside, she presented herself to the teller, who nodded recognition. Mrs. Blackwell, we've been expecting you. The manager would like to speak with you in his office, if you don't mind. Slightly puzzled, Nora followed the teller to a small office at the back of the building, where a middle-aged man in a sober suit rose to greet her. Mrs. Blackwell, I'm Howard Jenkins, manager of Desdemona Bank. Please have a seat. He gestured to a chair in front of his desk. I understand you're here about the settlement from your former husband. Yes, that's right, Nora confirmed. I was told the funds would be available by now. They are indeed, Jenkins assured her. $500, as specified in the agreement. He slid a paper across the desk. If you'll just sign here, I'll have the funds brought to you immediately. Nora read the document carefully before signing. It was a simple receipt, acknowledging that she had received the settlement in full and relinquished any further claims on Gerald Blackwell's estate. Will you be wanting the full amount in cash, Mrs. Blackwell? Jenkins inquired as he took back the signed paper. It's quite a substantial sum to carry. No, Nora replied. Actually, I'd like to open an account here. I plan to remain in the area. Jenkins's eyebrows rose slightly. I see. At the Adler Ranch, I understand. The question was loaded with implication, but Nora refused to be intimidated. Yes, for now, she said calmly. I'm also exploring the possibility of establishing a small medical practice in town. I was trained by my father, who was a doctor in Missouri. This information seemed to alter Jenkins's assessment somewhat. A medical practice. That would be a valuable addition to our community, Mrs. Blackwell. Doc Miller can't keep up with the demand as it is. So I've heard, Nora replied. I thought perhaps I could handle minor ailments and injuries, leaving the more serious cases for the doctor. A sensible arrangement, Jenkins agreed. Well, let me be the first to welcome you as a permanent resident of Desdemona, Mrs. Blackwell, and a depositor at our bank. He pushed a form toward her. If you'll just fill this out, we'll get your account established right away. By the time Nora and Martha left the bank, Nora had opened her account, deposited most of the settlement money, and withdrawn a small amount for immediate expenses. Their next stop was the doctor's office, a modest building near the center of town. Dr. Miller proved to be a gruff but friendly elderly man with a shock of white hair and hands gnarled by arthritis. He listened skeptically as Nora explained her background and proposal, but his expression gradually softened as she demonstrated her knowledge by correctly identifying various medical instruments and treatments. Well, Mrs. Blackwell, you certainly seem to know your business, he admitted finally. And Lord knows I could use the help. Can't ride out to every homestead with a sick child or injured hand anymore. These old bones won't take it. Then you'd be open to an arrangement, Nora asked hopefully. I could be available when you're not, handle the simpler cases and refer anything complex to you. Might work, Miller conceded. Would need to see you in action first, of course, get a sense of your capabilities. Of course, Nora agreed quickly. Whatever you think appropriate. Come back tomorrow, Miller decided. I've got a few patients scheduled. You can observe, maybe assist a bit. We'll take it from there. It was more than Nora had dared hope for on a first meeting. Thank you, doctor. I'll be here. As they left the office, Martha squeezed Nora's arm excitedly. That went well. He seemed genuinely interested. He did, Nora agreed, feeling a surge of optimism. If it works out, I could establish a regular schedule, perhaps 3 days in town and the rest at the ranch. It sounds perfect, Martha declared. You'll have your own work, your independence, but still be part of Cross Timber. The balanced arrangement appealed to Nora deeply. It would allow her to contribute meaningfully to the community while also building a life with Nathan. A life that would be a true partnership, not the unequal relationship she had endured with Gerald. They were about to mount their horses for the return journey when Tom Sullivan appeared, leading his gray stallion down the street. Ladies, he called cheerfully. What brings you to our metropolis today? Martha explained their errands while Nora noticed how Tom's gaze lingered on Martha as she spoke. There was something there. She realized an interest that Martha might or might not be aware of. Sounds like you've had a productive day, Tom said when Martha finished. And setting up a medical practice is a fine idea, Mrs. Blackwell. My ranch hands are always getting themselves cut up or kicked by horses. Please call me Nora, she invited. And I hope to be ready to treat those injuries soon. Tom grinned. Nora it is then, and while we're dispensing with formalities, I hope you'll call me Tom. He turned to Martha, his expression softening. You too, Miss Adler. I think we've known each other long enough. A faint blush colored Martha's cheeks. I suppose we have. Tom. The exchange was brief but charged with meaning, and Nora filed it away for future reference. Perhaps Martha's interest in Tom's ranch visits went beyond neighborly courtesy after all. The ride back to Cross Timber was pleasant, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the rolling landscape. Martha chattered about plans for the coming winter, preserves to be made, repairs to be completed before the snow came, a quilting project she wanted to start. And of course there's the harvest dance next month, she added. The whole county comes for that. It's at the Wilson farm this year they have the biggest barn. A dance, Nora echoed, surprised. I wouldn't have expected such formal entertainments out here. Martha laughed. Oh, it's hardly formal. Just fiddles and a caller, and everyone brings food to share. But it's one of the few times all winter that folks get together for something besides church or funerals. It sounded delightful, a true community gathering rather than the stilted society events Gerald had favored in Cheyenne. I look forward to it, Nora said sincerely. They found Nathan in the barn, attending to the new calf that had arrived in their absence, a healthy bull calf with a white star on its forehead that matched its mother's marking. Isn't he a beauty? Nathan said proudly as they admired the wobbly-legged newborn. Strong lungs on him, too. Heard him bellowing from the house when he was born. He's perfect, Nora agreed, charmed by the calf's big eyes and gangly limbs. Have you named him? Thought I'd leave that to you, Nathan replied with a smile. First calf born since you came to Cross Timber. Seems fitting. The gesture touched Nora deeply, another small way of including her in the life of the ranch. How about Star for his marking? Star it is, Nathan agreed, his eyes warm as they met hers over the calf's back. That evening, as they sat around the kitchen table after dinner, Nora shared the results of her trip to town, the bank account, the promising meeting with Dr. Miller, and her evolving plan to divide her time between a small medical practice and the ranch. It sounds like you've got it all worked out, Nathan observed, though there was a question in his eyes. The broad strokes, perhaps, Nora admitted, but there are still details to consider. Where I'll see patients in town, for instance, and my exact role here at the ranch. Your role can be whatever you want it to be, Nathan said carefully. Whatever feels right to you. The conversation hovered on the edge of something more definitive, something neither of them was quite ready to articulate fully. Martha, sensing the undercurrent, made a show of yawning. Well, I'm exhausted, she announced, rising from her chair. Think I'll turn in early. Don't stay up too late, you two. She disappeared down the hallway, leaving them alone. Your sister is about as subtle as a stampeding buffalo, Nora observed with a small laugh. Nathan smiled ruefully. She means well. I know, Nora said, and I appreciate her support. Yours too. She hesitated, then pushed ahead. Nathan, I want to be clear about something. When I talk about investing in the ranch, about finding a balance between my practice and life here, I'm not just thinking short term. Nathan reached across the table to take her hand. I hope that might be the case, he said softly, because I've been thinking long term since the day I brought you home. The simple statement, so characteristic of Nathan's straightforward nature, made Nora's heart swell with emotion. I never expected to find this, she admitted. After Gerald, I thought perhaps I wasn't meant for marriage, for partnership, but being here with you. She squeezed his hand. It's different. You really see me in a way he never did. How could I not? Nathan asked, his blue eyes intent on her face. Everything about you is worth seeing, Nora. Your kindness, your strength, your intelligence. The way you jumped right in and learned ranch work without complaint. The gentle way you handled that injured foal last week. He shook his head slightly as if amazed. You're an extraordinary woman. The words, spoken with such evident sincerity, brought tears to Nora's eyes. For so long with Gerald she had felt inadequate, always falling short of his expectations. Nathan's unconditional appreciation was a healing balm she hadn't known she needed. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me that way. Nathan rose and came around the table, drawing her to her feet and into his arms. I want to court you properly, Nora Winters, he said, using her maiden name in a way that felt significant, an acknowledgement that she was her own person again, not defined by her connection to Gerald. Not rushed, not pressured. but with the understanding that I believe we're meant to build a life together." "I'd like that," Nora replied, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. "A proper courtship." Nathan's smile was tender as he leaned down to kiss her, a gentle, reverent kiss that promised much more to come. "Then consider it begun," he murmured against her lips. The days that followed took on a sweet, purposeful rhythm. Nora began assisting Dr. Miller 3 days a week, quickly proving her worth and earning his gruff respect. Word spread that the doctor had a capable assistant, and soon Nora was treating everything from minor cuts and burns to fevers and coughs, referring the more serious cases to Dr. Miller as agreed. At Cross Timber, she continued to help with daily chores but also began taking on more specific responsibilities, keeping the ranch accounts, organizing the kitchen stores, and working with Nathan to plan the expansion of the horse breeding program. It was satisfying work, made more so by the knowledge that she was contributing to a future she would share. Nathan courted her with the same steady thoughtfulness that characterized everything he did. There were no grand gestures or elaborate outings, just small, meaningful moments that demonstrated his deepening feelings. A wildflower left on her pillow. A special edition of a book she had mentioned loving as a girl, ordered from Denver and presented without fanfare. A carved wooden box for her medical supplies, created in the evenings by the fire while she and Martha sewed. October gave way to November, and preparations for the harvest dance became the main topic of conversation in Desdemona. Martha was particularly excited, spending hours on a new dress and speculating about who might partner with whom for the various dances. "Tom Sullivan asked if he could reserve a dance with me," she confided to Nora as they worked in the kitchen one afternoon. "Just came right out and asked, bold as you please." "And what did you say?" Nora inquired, though Martha's pleased expression made the answer obvious. "I said yes, of course," Martha replied, a becoming blush coloring her cheeks, though I tried not to seem too eager. Nora smiled, pleased to see this development. "Tom seems like a good man. Nathan speaks highly of him." "He is," Martha agreed. "Hardworking, honest, not much for fancy talk, but then neither am I." She glanced at Nora. "Do you think Nathan has noticed? About Tom and me, I mean." "Men can be oblivious about these things," Nora said diplomatically. "But I suspect he'll figure it out at the dance, if not before." The night of the dance arrived crisp and clear, with a full moon illuminating the landscape as they drove to the Wilson farm. The barn had been transformed with lanterns and autumn decorations, dried cornstalks and pumpkins flanking the entrance, bundles of wheat and gourds adorning the interior. Nearly everyone in the county seemed to be there, from infants to grandparents. Tables laden with food lined one wall, and a small group of musicians was tuning up in a corner. Children darted between adults, playing games of tag despite their parents' admonitions to behave. Nathan helped Nora and Martha down from the wagon, offering Nora his arm as they approached the barn. She took it, conscious of the admiring glances they received as a couple. Word of their courtship had spread through the community, generating interest but surprisingly little scandal. It seemed that Desdemona's residents had collectively decided that Gerald's treatment of Nora justified her quick attachment to Nathan. Inside, they were greeted warmly by the Wilsons, and several other families Nora had come to know through her work with Dr. Miller. Even Mrs. Wilson, who had been so coolly assessing at Gerald's reception, now seemed genuinely friendly. "Mrs. Blackwell, or may I call you Nora? You're looking lovely tonight," she said. "That blue brings out your eyes beautifully." "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson," Nora replied, touched by the acceptance implied in the use of her first name. "And yes, please call me Nora." "Margaret, then," the older woman insisted. "And I must tell you, your work with Dr. Miller has been a godsend to this community. When my grandson had that fever last week, I was so relieved to find you in the office." Before Nora could respond, the musicians struck up a lively tune, and the caller announced the first dance. Nathan turned to her with a smile. "May I have this dance, Miss Winters?" he asked formally, though his eyes twinkled. "You may indeed, Mr. Adler," Nora replied, allowing him to lead her onto the floor. The dance was a simple reel, and Nora was grateful for the lessons Martha had given her in the days leading up to the event. She followed Nathan through the steps with reasonable grace, laughing when she occasionally got turned around. It was nothing like the rigid quadrilles and waltzes of Cheyenne society, but infinitely more enjoyable. As the evening progressed, Nora danced not only with Nathan but with several other men from the community: Tom Sullivan, Judge Wilson, even Dr. Miller, who proved surprisingly spry despite his years. From across the floor, she spotted Martha dancing with Tom, both of them looking so transparently happy that she wondered how Nathan could possibly have missed their mutual attraction. During a break between dances, she found herself standing with Nathan near the refreshment table, watching as Martha and Tom shared a cup of cider, their heads bent close in conversation. "I think your sister has an admirer," Nora observed casually. Nathan followed her gaze, his expression shifting from surprise to thoughtful assessment. "Tom, eh? Can't say I'm entirely shocked. He's been finding a lot of reasons to stop by the ranch lately." "And how do you feel about that?" Nora asked, curious about his reaction. Nathan considered for a moment. "Tom's a good man," he said finally. "Solid, treats his hands well, takes care of his land. If Martha's interested in him, I've got no objections." He glanced at Nora with a smile. "Besides, who am I to stand in the way of someone else's happiness when I've found my own?" The simple declaration warmed Nora through and through. "Have you? Found happiness, I mean?" Nathan's eyes held hers, serious and sincere. "More than I ever thought possible," he said quietly. "Because of you." Before Nora could respond, the musicians began another tune, and the caller announced a waltz. Nathan's eyebrows rose slightly. This was a more intimate dance than the communal reels and squares that had dominated the evening so far. "Shall we?" he asked, offering his hand. Nora placed her hand in his without hesitation. "I'd like that." They moved onto the floor, Nathan's arm circling her waist as he led her into the dance. He moved with surprising grace for a man who spent most of his days on horseback or doing physical labor. "You dance well," Nora commented as they circled the floor. "Ma insisted we learn," Nathan explained. "Said just because we lived on a ranch didn't mean we had to be uncultured." A smile tugged at his lips, "though I haven't had much occasion to practice since those lessons." "Well, you've retained the knowledge admirably," Nora assured him, enjoying the feel of his hand at her waist, the way he guided her confidently through the steps. As they danced, Nora became aware of a curious sense of rightness, as if all the tumultuous events of the past months had been leading inexorably to this moment, to this man. The thought should have frightened her, perhaps, coming so soon after the end of her marriage. Instead, it filled her with a peaceful certainty. "Nathan," she said softly, looking up at him as they turned, "I love you." The words, spoken simply and directly, seemed to stop time for a heartbeat. Nathan's step faltered momentarily before he recovered, his eyes never leaving her face. "Say that again," he requested, his voice husky with emotion. "I love you," Nora repeated, more confident now. "I'm sure of it." The smile that spread across Nathan's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual, then blindingly bright. "I love you too, Nora," he said, the words carrying clearly despite the music and surrounding conversation. "Have since almost the first moment, I think." They continued to dance, but something had shifted between them, a final barrier falling away, a future opening up before them with crystalline clarity. When the waltz ended, Nathan kept hold of her hand. "Come outside with me for a moment," he asked. "I need to speak with you privately." Nora nodded, her heart racing as she followed him through the crowd and out into the cool night air. The moon was high now, bathing the farmyard in silver light. Nathan led her away from the barn to a quiet spot beneath an old oak tree, its few remaining leaves rustling softly overhead. "I had a plan," he began, still holding her hand. "Was going to wait until Christmas, do this properly, but after what you just said in there." He shook his head slightly, a smile playing at his lips. "Plans change." With that, he reached into his pocket and withdrew something small that caught the moonlight. Then, to Nora's mingled shock and delight, he dropped to one knee before her. "Nora Winters," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "I know it hasn't been long and some might say we're rushing things, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of my love for you." He opened his hand to reveal a ring, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. "This was my mother's," he explained. "Pa saved for years to buy it for her. She left it to me, said I should give it to the woman who captured my heart the way she captured his." Nora's throat tightened with emotion as Nathan continued, "I'm asking you to be my wife, Nora, to build a life with me at Cross Timber, to be my partner in everything. Will you marry me?" Though she had sensed where the conversation was heading, the actual proposal still took her breath away. For a moment, she could only look down at this good, honorable man who was offering her his heart and his future with such straightforward sincerity. "Yes," she finally managed, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Yes, Nathan, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he rose to his feet, slipping the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. "I love you," he said simply, gathering her into his arms. "And I love you," Nora replied, the words coming easily now, naturally. She raised her face for his kiss, sealing their promise under the vast Wyoming sky. They returned to the dance hand in hand, both too full of emotion to immediately share their news. But Martha took one look at them, her gaze dropping to the ring now adorning Nora's hand, and let out a squeal of delight that drew every eye in the barn. "You asked her," she exclaimed, hurrying over to embrace first her brother, then Nora. "I knew you wouldn't wait until Christmas like you said." Nathan laughed, his arm settling around Nora's waist. "Seems I'm predictable after all, sister." Word spread quickly through the gathering, and soon they were surrounded by well-wishers offering congratulations and good-natured teasing about their whirlwind courtship. Rather than feeling overwhelmed, Nora was touched by the community's genuine happiness for them. "When's the wedding to be?" Mrs. Wilson asked, admiring Nora's ring. Nora looked to Nathan, realizing they hadn't discussed this detail. "We haven't decided yet," she began, but Nathan interrupted gently. "Actually, I was thinking New Year's Day," he said, glancing at Nora. "If that's not too soon for you, seems a fitting way to start a new year and a new life together." The suggestion was perfect symbolic without being overly sentimental, and giving them just enough time to make the necessary preparations. "New Year's Day sounds wonderful," Nora agreed, squeezing his hand. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of dancing, congratulations, and shared joy. By the time they headed home in the early hours of the morning, Nora felt as though she was floating somewhere between dream and reality. "Happy?" Nathan asked as he helped her into the wagon, Martha already settled in the back seat, drowsily content after her own evening of dancing predominantly with Tom Sullivan. "More than I can say," Nora replied honestly, "though it still seems somewhat unreal." Nathan climbed up beside her, taking the reins. "It's real," he assured her, leaning over to place a quick kiss on her temple. "And it's just the beginning." As they drove through the moonlit landscape toward Cross Timber toward home, Nora reflected on the strange, winding path that had led her here. 6 months ago, she had been Gerald Blackwell's increasingly unhappy wife in Cheyenne. 3 months ago, she had been abandoned at the Desdemona Depot, her future uncertain and frightening. And now, she was Nora Winters again, soon to be Nora Adler with a ring on her finger, a man she loved deeply at her side, and a future stretching before her full of promise and purpose. When Gerald had left her at the depot that day, he had thought he was discarding something worthless. Instead, he had unknowingly set her free to discover her true value and to find the man who would cherish her for exactly who she was. The wedding preparations filled the weeks leading up to New Year's Day with a flurry of activity. Martha threw herself into the planning with characteristic enthusiasm, while Nathan focused on preparing the ranch for the coming winter and ensuring that the house would be comfortable for his new bride. For her part, Nora divided her time between her work with Dr. Miller, helping Martha with wedding arrangements and settling into her evolving role at Cross Timber. The pattern felt right, a balance of independence and shared purpose that she knew would sustain their marriage in the years to come. New Year's Day dawned clear and cold, the landscape transformed by a light snowfall the previous night. The ceremony was to take place in Desdemona's small church, with a celebration afterward at the hotel, the same venue where Gerald had hosted his reception months earlier, a irony not lost on Nora. Martha helped Nora dress in the simple but elegant ivory gown they had worked on together, adorning her hair with small white flowers and a borrowed veil. When she looked in the mirror, Nora barely recognized herself, not because of the finery, but because of the radiant happiness that transformed her features. "You're beautiful," Martha said, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Nathan's going to be speechless when he sees you." Nora squeezed her soon-to-be sister's hand. "Thank you, Martha, for everything, for welcoming me into your home, for your friendship, for your help with all of this." She gestured to the dress, the veil. "I couldn't have asked for a better sister." Martha embraced her tightly. "And I couldn't have asked for a better sister-in-law," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You've brought so much joy to this house, Nora, to Nathan especially, but to me as well." The church was filled to capacity when Tom Sullivan, who was serving as Nora's escort in the absence of any male relatives, led her down the aisle to where Nathan waited. The entire community had turned out for the occasion, a testament to how quickly Nora had become part of Desdemona's extended family. Nathan's face as he watched her approach was something Nora knew she would remember for the rest of her life, a mixture of awe, tenderness, and such profound love that it took her breath away. He looked handsome in his best suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his eyes never leaving hers as she drew nearer. The ceremony itself was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged traditional vows, their voices steady and sure as they promised to love and cherish each other for all the days of their lives. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan's kiss was both gentle and possessive, a perfect balance that seemed to embody the partnership they were forging. The celebration afterward was joyous and uninhibited, with music, dancing, and food in abundance. Nora danced not only with her new husband, but with what felt like every man in the county, all offering good wishes and occasionally ribald advice for the newlyweds. During a brief moment of respite, She found herself standing with Nathan near the window, watching the winter sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Happy, Mrs. Adler?" he asked, his arm around her waist. The new name sent a thrill through Nora. "Incredibly so, Mr. Adler," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "Though I'm beginning to think we should make our escape soon. I've danced with so many people my feet may never recover." Nathan laughed softly. "Just say the word." "The house is ready for us. Martha's staying with the Wilsons tonight to give us privacy." The thought of returning to Cross Timber to their home as husband and wife filled Nora with a sweet anticipation. "Then let's bid our guests good night," she suggested. "I'm ready to begin our life together properly." As they made their farewells and prepared to leave, Nora caught sight of a familiar figure entering the Hotel Gerald Blackwell, apparently having just arrived in Desdemona on business. He stopped short when he saw the wedding celebration, his expression darkening as he realized what was happening. For a moment, their eyes met across the crowded room. Gerald's face betrayed a flicker of something surprise, perhaps, or even regret before his usual mask of cool indifference slid back into place. He gave her a curt nod, then turned and left without a word. "Everything all right?" Nathan asked, noticing her momentary distraction. Nora turned back to her husband, finding in his concerned gaze everything that had been missing from her first marriage: genuine care, respect, partnership. "Everything is perfect," she assured him, taking his hand. "Absolutely perfect." And as they rode through the winter night toward Cross Timber, toward the future they would build together, Nora knew it was true. What had seemed like an ending at that depot months ago had in fact been the most beautiful beginning she could have imagined. She had been returned, discarded, deemed worthless, only to be found by the man who saw her true value, who had said those simple, life-changing words. "Come home." And home, she now knew with absolute certainty, was wherever Nathan Adler was. As years passed, the story of how Nathan found Nora at the depot became something of a legend in Desdemona. Their marriage flourished, built on the solid foundation of mutual respect and genuine love that had characterized their courtship. Nora's medical practice grew steadily, eventually occupying a small building of its own in town, where she treated patients 3 days a week. On the other days, she worked alongside Nathan at Cross Timber, helping to expand the horse breeding operation into one of the most respected in the territory. 2 years after their wedding, Nora gave birth to their first child, a son they named James, after Nathan's father. A daughter, Catherine, followed 18 months later, and another son, David, 2 years after that. The children grew up surrounded by love, learning the values of hard work and compassion that their parents exemplified. Martha eventually married Tom Sullivan, joining their neighboring ranches into one substantial operation. Their wedding, held under the summer sky at Cross Timber, was a joyous celebration that rivaled Nathan and Nora's own. Gerald Blackwell's fortunes, meanwhile, took a different turn. His business investments faltered, and rumors circulated that his young wife had left him for a banker in Denver. He faded from Desdemona's consciousness, appearing only occasionally on business that grew less profitable with each visit. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Nora with a special gift, a small locket containing miniature portraits of their 3 children. As he fastened it around her neck, he kissed her temple softly. "Any regrets?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist as they stood on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant color. Nora leaned back against his chest, contentment flowing through her like a gentle river. "Not a single one," she replied truthfully. "Every step of the journey led me here, to you and our family. How could I regret any of it?" Nathan's arms tightened around her. "I thank God every day for giving me the courage to speak to you at that depot," he murmured. "Best decision I ever made." Nora turned in his embrace to face him, noting how the years had added a touch of silver to his temples, but had done nothing to diminish the love in his eyes when he looked at her. "You remember what you said to me that day?" she asked softly. Nathan smiled, the memory clear in both their minds. "Come home," he quoted. Simple words for what turned out to be the most important invitation of my life. "And the most important acceptance of mine," Nora replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him as the last rays of sunlight gilded their home, the home they had built together from a moment of courage, compassion, and the recognition of something precious that others had failed to see.